All right. Hello and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be talking about empathy and I'm going to be talking about attachment and how being a human being, we have these natural impulses towards empathy and we have natural impulses towards attachment, and how these things can be manipulated and utilized against us, and how we can also swing too far in the other direction of being afraid of these things being used against us, that we start to negate the very important aspects of these elements of the human condition, and how we might get to a place where we're trying to become so detached and we're trying to become so kind of elevated out of the human experience that it becomes a tripping point for us. Okay, so again, everything that I'm about to say is my opinion, and it's what I have observed in my life on this planet. And of course, as always, defer to your own experience, defer to your own intuition, defer to your own understanding, experience. And if anything that I'm saying doesn't resonate with you or doesn't vibe with you, of course, take yourself instead of me. And this is all just food for thought, just some stuff for us to consider. These are just some thoughts for us to look at as, again, I'm seeing in the self-help and the spirituality and the personal growth world a kind of a shift and a movement in a direction that I think might be harmful for us if we don't kind of look at it and maybe scale it back a little bit. And like I say, just take a critical eye towards it. So talking about first, well, I don't know. This is such a thing for me because I have grown up as someone who has a lot of emotion and someone who has a lot of big feelings about my own experience, but also has a lot of big feelings about the experiences of others. And so I've been told in my life that I am empathic, that I am an empath, that I am all of these things. And not just recently, like not just in the last couple of years. Growing up in the Christian church, growing up in that kind of like spirituality world, 20 years ago, I was often told by people that one of the gifts that God had given me was this deep capacity to understand and feel what was happening with other people. And again, this was for me an experience that growing up I didn't realize was special. I didn't realize it was different. I didn't realize that not everyone was feeling what I was feeling and experiencing what I was experiencing in my reality. And that was just having, so I got a comment here. This is the main thing that's been coming up for me too lately. Thank you for speaking to this. It feels so important right now. Crucial. Yes. Okay. So again, like I grew up with a lot of being able to feel the experience of other people, being able to feel the emotions of other people, being able to feel the kind of like the discord between what people were saying and what people were acting like on the surface and what was really going on for them under the surface, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. And then growing up kind of like indoctrinated into the Christian church, I had a lot of like, oh my God, like these people aren't saved, they're hurting, they're struggling, people are in pain, people are suffering, and we need to help them. I need to help them. Like I really felt like there was this huge expectation on me, this big whatever responsibility on me to help people when I felt like they were suffering. And the thing was that I always felt like people were suffering. So like just like part of my history, right, is I was diagnosed early on with high anxiety. Like literally was sent to the guidance counselor in grade 1 because I had such high anxiety, and it was partially that I wanted to perform and do good in school and all these things, but most of it was that, again, I was just so hurt by how much everyone else was hurting, and kids were mean to each other, and there was just this constant competition at school, and I just like couldn't deal with it. I was completely fried out, and so like again, this kind of led to me getting like really bullied and really walked all over for all of my life, because I just like couldn't I couldn't set a boundary with people. I was just constantly feeling like everyone else was struggling and everyone else was hurting, and everything that was going on with everyone else, I could feel it all, and it felt like it was my job to fix it. And so growing up with me, this was something that got pathologized. Yeah, that it wasn't seen as a good thing that I was so sensitive and that I could feel what was going on with other people, and it wasn't necessarily seen as like a gift or anything like this. It was like, there's something wrong with this girl, like there's something really wrong with this child, and she's got like really high anxiety, and she's depressed, and she's worried about all these things all the time. And I remember like my dad, like just I would just like talk to him about how upset I was over how people were and how mean the kids were to each other, and what was going on in the world, like animal torture and all of these things. And he was always just like, you're worrying too much, you're taking on too much responsibility, like this has nothing to do with you, you need to like let this go, like this is insane that you're like thinking all of these things all the time. But for me, it was like, I'm not just like choosing to think all these things all the time. Like this is my experience, this is my reality, this is how life feels for me, and I can't turn it off. Like it wasn't a choice I was making, like is what I was trying to say. And again, like for a long time, it wasn't understood, and even I don't know that anyone understood that I was having such a different experience than everyone else was having, because I don't know how I would have had the language to express that, like, hey, I like feel what's going on in your body right now. Because like I just thought that was normal, and because it was normal to me, it was something I had always had. And so like I say, growing up, I had just super high anxiety levels, super high depression, felt really, really responsible for everyone around me, was a complete doormat, because again, I could see that everyone was coming from pain. I could see that people were mean to each other because they were suffering. Like I could never look at anyone or see anyone as evil or bad or trying to be harmful, because I could just see that they were hurting, and I could feel that they were hurting, and there was like a lot of that. So like I say, growing up, this was mostly pathologized. Like most of the people who were around me growing up and forever, it was just like, this is way too much, you're way too intense, you need to like chill out and like go on anti-anxiety medication, because like we don't know what to do with you. And so with that, like I didn't have a lot of tools and a lot of skills for processing what was going on with me. And I feel like this is one of the things that is super common in our world, is like, again, like I understand that there's like this new age kind of wave of people being diagnosed and self-diagnosed as empaths, and I'm an empath and all these things, and it's kind of like wearing it as this badge of honor. And for me, I'm just gonna say, like personally, it's never felt like a badge of honor. It's always felt like, one, it's not a choice I'm making. Like I'm not like a special person who's like choosing to be empathic and like that this makes me more spiritual or more aware or more anything than anyone else. It was like this is a thing that's just happening to me. Like that, I feel like that describes it more. Like it just, this idea of like bragging about it just like never really resonated with me personally, because it didn't didn't do anything to earn my empathy. I didn't do anything to become the way that I was. It's nothing special about me. Like I am that way. And then second, I think again, of course, what we want to understand is that normal human beings, we all have empathy. All normal human beings, like this is not a spiritual gift. This is not something that is necessarily unique to a certain group of people that is absent in the population. Empathy is a normal part of being a human, and we all have it to certain degrees. And there are definitely, and I think too that again, a lot of the time in our world right now, I think we see a lot of people who lack empathy, and I'm not talking about like actual diagnosable narcissists or people with like genuine personality disorders. I'm talking like just like the general population, normal people. We can see like a lack of empathy and a lack of capacity to understand other people's experience and to like understand that people are suffering or that they're hurting or that they are the way that they are, usually because the people who are having that lack of empathy are also hurting. They're also in a state of fear and again, I don't mean like they're in a state of fear. I mean like our world is scary, right? Like we live in a world of actual discontent and disorder and dis-ease and unsafety, and we have a lot of manufactured disorder and dis-ease and unsafety in our world. And I think that when people are in a state of being afraid for themselves, which and I'm going to talk about this later, that the media, we can be as human beings in a state where we have a job, we have money, we have a roof over our head, we have people we know and we love, and we live in a constant state of fear and a constant state of anxiety and a constant state of not feeling okay, because our capitalist structures are built on that fear, right? Our capitalist, the way that our society and our economy currently functions is that we all have to be feeling that insecurity and that not enoughness and that I'm not safe feeling in order to subject ourselves to overworking and overproducing and participating in the structures that keep our economy going in our productive sense and in our consumptive sense. Right? When we don't feel safe, when we don't feel like we're going to be okay, we constantly feel like we need something to fill that void. We need something to consume, to buy, to have, to be going for. We need to be reaching for that next level. We need to be doing all the things because we just don't feel like we're okay where we are. And the media on all levels feeds us that all day long, every single day, because again, that's how the world works. Like that is how the world is working right now. And that is how our economy was formed. Like it was formed on exploitation. It was formed on inflated value. It was formed on less money being given to the people who are doing the actual production and inflated value so that those who owned the means of production could take home massive profits at the expense of everyone else. And in order for us to participate in that, we have to believe that we could one day be in the place where the owners of the means of production are, which is usually a big lie, and we have to be scared. We have to be in a state where we don't ever feel like anything is ever good enough, where we never feel like we are good enough, because then again, we would slow down in our production and we would slow down in our consumption and the economy would fall apart. So the fact that we live in a world where so many people, even people who seemingly have good lives, can't empathize with people outside of their sphere, outside of their experience, it's most of the time because people are in a state of just shut down. We're already in a state of overwhelm. We're already in a state of being afraid for ourselves so much that we don't have the extra bandwidth to empathize with anyone outside of our own experience. And I think the other thing is that we are having such an individualized experience, like our consciousness is our experience, and the world and reality itself are so complex, and there's so much information coming at us from every direction at all times. Because of that, again, it can be incredibly difficult to take a step back and to realize that our experience isn't the experience, and to realize that everyone isn't just us making bad choices. That is a really, really difficult thing for us to wrap our minds around, because for most of us, we're not even at the step of being able to empathize with ourselves. Like, we have our own history, we have our own understanding. Like, we can look at our entire story and see how we got to where we are, and we still blame ourselves and shame ourselves and think that we're shitty, even though we know all the things that led up to where we are right now, and that at no point did we decide that we were just going to be shitty to ourselves and shitty to other people. At no point did we decide, I'm just going to be addicted, or I'm just going to be unproductive, or I'm just going to sabotage myself, even though I have these awesome alternative options I equally have access to and could do. I'm just going to do the shitty thing. Like, we all know we didn't do that, and yet we all still think there's something wrong with us for being where we are. So the fact that we don't have empathy for ourselves, is it any wonder that we then don't have empathy for other people? Is it any wonder that we then feel like we can't understand that someone else might be having a different experience than us? Is it any wonder that we can't assume that the addict or the criminal or the person with the different political philosophy than us have good reasons for being where they are? Because we can't even assume it in ourselves, and we have our own stories. So again, to understand that, like, we lack empathy as a humanity, I think so much because we just lack understanding of ourselves. Like, we just are not understanding ourselves. We're not understanding human evolution. We're not understanding human psychology and how we have all been passed down ways of being and patterns and mindsets and perceptions generation after generation after generation after generation that are flawed and that have gone unquestioned, and that we're just adapting to this ever-changing world at lightning speed, not consciously, and then we're ending up looking at ourselves consciously and being like, well, what the fuck is wrong with me? Nothing. You see? So to say that there are special empaths versus everyone else, I just don't think that that's a reality. I think there are some people like myself, like, I can't explain why I have that dialed up so high. Some people could even look at me and say that I have that because of trauma, right? That I was different. And so learning to empath and learning to understand what my caregivers were doing and what everyone around me was doing, it was like a protective mechanism. But again, like, I never used my empathy as a way to protect myself. It was just like one of these things. Like, I knew everything about everyone and could never use it to my advantage, ever. Like, it always bit me in the ass that I was empathic. So there's that. But anyways, the point being, we all have empathy and we all have the capacity for empathy. And I feel like we, as spiritual people, sometimes look out at the world and we look at people who are seemingly so lacking in empathy and lacking in their capacity to look at other people as human beings who are just different from them, having a different experience than them, and lacking in that capacity to be nice and understanding of where people are at. And we spiritually judge that. without understanding that it's like we don't know where the person who's lacking that empathy is coming from. Like, we live in a world right now that, again, from all sides, we're constantly being told that we are not good enough, that we are not enough, and we are being rejected, and that fear of being rejected is constantly on the forefront. Trends changing, just everything, the way that social structures are set up, the way that political structures are set up, the way that our economy is set up, it's like everything is like constantly on the brink of falling apart. And so we constantly have that fear activated in us that we're going to be rejected or that we're not going to get our needs met, which are one and the same thing. And it's like, this is why we're so afraid. And this is why we tend to have such a lack of empathy. That's part of the reason why. Another part of the reason is I just think that like people tend to have, like, it takes a lot of thinking. It takes like a lot of mental juice to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It takes a lot of mental and emotional juice to be able to put yourself in someone else's experience and to empathize with it. And again, I don't know that a lot of people have the bandwidth for it. And I think that as empathic people, looking at other people being not empathic, it can be really hard, but we kind of have to understand that it's like they're there for a reason and people are being non-empathetic for a reason. Now, the main thing I want to say is that if you experience a lot of empathy, there's nothing wrong with you and it's not a pathology. You're not broken, you're not too sensitive, you're not wrong and bad, and there isn't some flaw in you. It's a part of your program, it's a part of the way that you are, and for whatever reason, it is how you are. So rather than allowing it to be pathologized or allowing yourself to pathologize yourself, I do want to say that like it is heavy to be empathic, especially in our world right now, especially in our world ever, because we are living in a time and a space where we have access 24/7 to the worst news ever. We have access 24/7 to the worst news ever that we can do essentially nothing about. So not only do we have just people in our everyday life that we are connected to, that we know and that we love, who are experiencing pain and suffering, because pain and suffering are a huge part of this human experience, we also have access to the entire world that is experiencing pain and suffering. And so for a lot of us, the instinct is to shut down and to turn it off and to self-medicate and to numb and to stimulate. And I think that a lot of the time when people have any kind of habit or life choice, like life management tool of being sort of obsessive about something or nitpicking in at an area of our lives, like being very deeply obsessed about our bodies or very deeply obsessed about work or very deeply obsessed about our relationships, and we kind of have this or these tools that we use to numb ourselves or to stimulate. It's because we have so much feeling and so much going on that's not even just our own experience and what is going on with us. We have these deep feelings and these deep experiences coming at us from all different directions that we don't know how to process, that overwhelm us. And so we try and take control and we try to self-soothe by hyper focusing on something or by numbing out. And this is, again, my belief and my opinion. People with eating disorders, people with addictions, people with just any kind of like addictive personality trait, I do think that sometimes it can at least partially be because we're coping. We're trying to manage the emotion. We're trying to get control over something when we feel out of control of everything else. And it, again, it needs compassion. we need to start to understand that being highly sensitive and seeing the world and feeling what's going on with everyone is a part of this experience for some of us. And then the next thing is learning how to recognize when we're making something our job or our fault when it isn't. And I think that for the people out there who are experiencing empathy, that you can't turn it off, like it's not something you can dial down or dial back. Learning nervous system regulation tools, so like learning how to orient. I have a video up on my YouTube channel if you're trapped in overwhelm, to the 4 steps for orientation. Learning pressure point techniques, so there's one where you just like press on the top of your head and just take some deep breath. Learning alternate nostril breathing, learning to recenter yourself in the reality that you're actually in, and your own experience can be incredibly helpful. So learning when you're outside of your own perspective and you're outside of your own experience and you're feeling it as though it is your own, and you're taking responsibility for it, that is the tool. Like those are the tools, and again, that is much easier said than done. I'm still working on it as a person who has had empathy my entire life, learning how to say, okay, that is not my job, while still doing what you can to help and doing what you can to support, because again, we want to find that balance. And I think that this is something that is different for all of us, because we all have different capacities. There's no right or wrong way to empathize and then try to help. And other than, with the caveat of, when we can understand that we do not have the power to change other people's lives or other people's experience. All we can ever really do is offer validation, offer resources, offer our opinion and guidance. And so where we have resources to offer, we offer them in a way that's not taking from ourselves. Where we have empathy and time to validate, we offer that. Where we have time and the ability to offer, like I say, advice where it's being asked for. So again, that's a huge part about empathy, is learning only to enter when you're invited and to offer what's being asked for in terms of advice and support and opinion. Wait till you're invited, and until you're invited, assume it's not your responsibility, right? And then with large world problems, things, places where you can offer resources, money, food, shelter, all of these things, offer it to the best of your ability without draining yourself, and then let it be enough. We have to learn how to disconnect from what is not ours. Now, where I think this is going in a dangerous direction within the spirituality, self-help, personal growth, self-love community, is that for the last couple of years, there's been a big swing towards sovereignty and this idea that we are all sovereign beings having our own sovereign experience, and no one can make you feel anything. And if you are having a bad experience, it's because you're in a victim mentality and you are choosing that, and you're not high vibes, and it's all on other people to fix their own situation. And if people are in a shitty situation, that it's their fault on some level, that they are choosing it, that they're not working hard enough, that they're not doing what they should be doing. And there's this kind of rhetoric out there that has gone even further than this, which is the idea that if we're being shown war or any of these things on social media, or with what just happened in the last couple of years with the illness and all of these things, that there's this idea that if you're buying into that if you're seeing that as true, and you're understanding that people are suffering maybe in ways that you are not suffering, that you're being manipulated by the media, that you're being manipulated by someone's agenda, and that we need to just rise above it and not look at it, and that if you're sad about it, or if you're having feelings about it, that is some lack in you, some lack of spiritual awareness in you, and that you are not enlightened, essentially. Okay. And so where I want to start with this is first understanding that, again, we are living in unprecedented times with unprecedented access to the suffering of people that we never would even have known existed 50 years ago. We are living in a time where on our phones and on our TVs and on our computers, we have constant access to information and to people's opinions and to people's experiences, and it's all very overwhelming. Okay? So to understand that, of course, we are overwhelmed. Of course, there's always something horrifying to see. There's always someone on some media form telling us that the next thing that's going to ruin your life is coming for you. And there is absolutely a overexposure, like I say, to things that we literally, even if we wanted to, can't do anything about. And there can be a feeling like we're supposed to care about everything, and we're supposed to be involved in everything, and that can become incredibly overwhelming. Okay? Second thing, I think there needs to be an understanding that, okay, for a long time, spiritual people have talked about the splitting of the worlds, and the old earth and the new earth, and that there's like this splitting of a timeline and the splitting of the timelines, right? And that if you're enlightened and you're doing your spiritual work and you're doing whatever, you're going to ascend to 5D or whatever the next thing is, and if you're not doing it, you're going to be stuck in the old paradigm and all these things. And one way that I think we can kind of look at that, just one way, is to understand that on this planet, there is essentially two different worlds. There are absolutely two different planets on this planet, or two of many different realities, but one way that we can kind of split what kind of lifetime you're having, and that is the lifetime where you have access and security versus not having access and not having security. And I feel like a lot of the time in the spirituality, self-help, personal growth worlds, the people who are at the top of these worlds, who are speaking like where I'm speaking from, people who are making videos, people who are offering spirituality advice, are people who have a level of access and safety in their position in society that they are perceiving everyone else has, and they are projecting their experience out onto everyone else, and then filtering the news and filtering what's coming at them through that perspective and through that lens. And then they're feeling violated, and they're feeling like all of the things that they're being exposed to is overwhelming, and it's a lot, and it's scary, and they're feeling like they're being manipulated, and they're feeling like they're being lied to. And because, again, through their perspective and through their lens and through their filter, everyone is having the experience that they are having. And therefore, if they are in a state of poverty, or if they're believing that disease is real and that it's not something you can just control, and if they're believing in any of the things that the media are telling us about, that they're just low consciousness and low vibe and not rising above. And like I say, I can have empathy for that perspective when for your entire life, or for most of your life, you've had access to upward mobility, you've had access to healthcare, to education, to shelter, to safety. And when your experience has been one that you've been able to take control of your own life and control of your own destiny and pull yourself out of the pit and do all that stuff, it can feel like everyone else is living that life too. And therefore, all of this fear and all of this, people are in a bad way and there's nothing they can do about it and all that stuff, is just low consciousness people making bad choices. And the second thing, that I fully agree that every form of media that we can consume is trying to manipulate us on some level. This is not just the mainstream media, and I'm putting that in quotes because at this point, media is media. And most media, okay, right? We have to understand, most media, the big stuff, everyone who's on social media, who is an influencer, from the news, big TikTok channels, big YouTube channels, every form of media where that is their job or that is a part of their job, the way that is their job, the way that anyone makes money making content to be consumed via media is because they have advertisers who pay them to do it. Like, this is something we need to fully understand before we interact with any form of media. Not just the mainstream media or whatever we have decided that is, but all media. People who make their money, especially on any form of media, social media, regular media, whatever it is, they are being paid by someone who's producing a product, by an advertiser of some sort. And that advertiser has a vested interest in people believing certain things, in people having certain information, in people having certain fears, right? Like, so kind of bringing this full circle. We have to understand that in order to keep our economy going, right now, everything is sold to us based on a deficiency we have that product is going to fill. And in order for us to perceive that we have that deficiency, we have to have certain mindsets about the world and what's really going on in order for that product to be appealing to us. So advertisers choose whose content, because again, people make content for eyeballs. And advertisers choose whose content gets the right eyeballs for their product. So it's kind of like a snake eating its own tail. Yeah? That advertisers are looking for people to believe certain things so that they will feel the need to buy their product, and then they're gearing themselves towards people who are making content that speak to those kinds of people, who have those kinds of beliefs, who have those kinds of ideas. And they're saying, okay, if we advertise on this person's content, or this person advertises our content for us, they're more likely to buy it because they believe the thing. They believe in the deficiency they need to believe in order to buy our product. Yes? All media is this. Unless people are independently wealthy, like me, right? Like, I don't have product placement in my content. I barely even talk about the things that I personally have produced that you can buy, because I don't have to. I'm not virtuous. I'm not better than anyone else. I'm not telling anyone to stop advertising on their channel at all. What I am saying is the reason I don't have to do it is because my husband makes enough money that I don't have to do it. I can put out this content for free without having to have advertisers, purely because I'm already in a financial situation where I'm safe. That's the only reason. There's no virtue to it. And that is what we need to understand. okay? All media is trying to manipulate you. So the idea that we're being manipulated by the media to believe certain things that aren't necessarily reality is absolutely a true idea. Where it's getting, I think, messed up is when we can then look at people who are in a state where their country went to war and it was not their choice. They did nothing about it, and now their house got blown up, and it had nothing to do with their personal choice. And we're saying, don't look at that, that's a distraction. You're just trying to be, the media is just trying to distract you from what's really going on. We need to be very, very careful, in my opinion. When we look at the suffering of people who are having a very different experience than us, and us saying, that is a distraction being used to manipulate me. Sometimes it's just not at all that. And that is us pathologizing our empathy skills. War, disease, famine, manufactured discontent, regular discontent. These are things we should absolutely have empathy for. We should absolutely be caring about the people who are having a different experience than us. Okay? And the second thing is to understand that as much as we want to believe that everyone is having the experience that they're having because they are choosing to have that experience, and that if they didn't want to have that experience, they could choose something else, that is a fantasy. That is a fantasy we are telling ourselves to try to make ourselves feel safe in this world that we don't feel safe in. Yes, to a degree, people can make choices. Yes, to a degree, we have power to change our own lives. This is absolutely true. And not everyone has the access and the capacity to make their lives better in ways that we have had the access and privilege to make our own lives better. Not everyone, like I say, is in a situation that they're in because of choices that they personally made. In the spirituality and the self-help and the self-love world, a lot of people who are in a position where they have relative safety and access and upward mobility, they are absolutely having an experience where their personal choices are kind of like the deciding factor in what's going on in their reality, where they have a lot of power and a lot of say over their own experience. They don't have chronic illness. They don't have debt. They don't have years and years of societal structures working against them. And therefore, it can very much look to that person like life is just a choice. You're traumatized, you're hurting, you're scared, you're sick, whatever. Eat healthy. Take responsibility for yourself. Make better choices. And for some people, that is a reality. For some people, they can very dramatically make their own lives better based on their choices. But that, again, we need to understand is possible because of where people are in society. That is not a universal experience. People are not choosing to be in a war-torn country. People are not choosing to be born with chronic illness. People are not choosing to be born into situations where they're abused. Not everyone has access to being able to make a choice to make their lives better. And when we say, when the media shows us these people, that is a distraction, and I don't want to look at that, and when there are situations put in place to try to help people who don't have the access that we have, and that feels like an affront to our freedom and our choice, we're lacking in empathy. We are not putting ourselves in the shoes of other people, and we are not understanding that not everyone has the same access as us, not everyone has the same privilege as us. And I believe that this idea that we are all just experiencing what we're choosing to experience is a story we tell ourselves because we want to feel like we are in control of our own lives. Of course, we want to feel like all of the good things that are happening to us are happening because we deserve it. When we look out at the world and we have so much more and so much better than other people, of course we want to tell ourselves, I'm here because I deserve it. I'm here because I'm special. I'm here because I worked hard. I'm here because I made better choices than everyone else makes. So if they're suffering and they're struggling and they're all whatever they're experiencing, they chose it in their past life, they deserved it, they're just not making good choices now. We tell ourselves that not because it's reality. We tell ourselves that because it makes us feel more secure. It makes us feel protected against bad things happening to us, because we keep telling ourselves bad things only happen to you because you make bad choices, or because you're a bad person, or because you do silly things, or because you have a low vibration, or because you're not doing your work, or because, right? And then we start to make it a superstition. Like every time I get a cold, it's because I have something blocking my throat chakra, or what do I really need to be saying? And it turns again into this superstition where we're just trying to protect ourselves from the pain of having to experience the reality that some people are really suffering on this planet, and it's because of really shitty systems that are bigger than all of us, and it just sucks. Right? We want to protect ourselves from the reality, I think, a lot of the time, that life is very painful, and that there's a lot of pain involved in the structures that are existing, and then to understand that a lot of the time, to fix the suffering of a lot of people would require that our lives get downgraded to a certain degree. That we step out of our never enough, always over-consuming, always over-producing, and realize that we got to get off this treadmill because we're contributing to it. And that's hard and that's scary. But again, to pathologize the capacity to feel for the people who are being harmed and hurt by the world leaders and their choices, to feel and have empathy for people who did not ever have the access that we had, who did not have the upward mobility that we had, that had things against them in our structures that were not against us, to not be able to have compassion for that and to see those people as a distraction from what's really going on, I don't think that's healthy. Because again, the problem is the system. The system is a big problem. And for a lot of us, including me, the system benefits us. So to question it and to say, like, look, I'm not necessarily here just because I made great choices. Like, I'm me sitting here. I did make good choices, and I had a lot of access and a lot of privilege that is not universally, like, just the fact that I was born in Canada and that I have a Canadian passport and that I got a Canadian education, that I speak English as my first language, put me in a position in society that 90% of people, they'll never have the access that I had to be able to make a life that I've made for myself. It wasn't something special about me. I was just born into that. And to look out at the world of people who will never have the access that I have, and to not be heartbroken about it, I don't really know how you do that. So again, I think a lot of the time we're pathologizing and running away from the existential crisis of realizing that people don't have what we have, and that life is scary and we're not in total control, right? So again, we say that's just a distraction, don't look at that, low vibes, they could just fix it, because we want to tell ourselves again that if that is true, then that means that I can guarantee my own success. I can guarantee my own safety, because then I can just make good choices and I can just do all the right things and I deserve it and I can work for it and no tragedy will ever befall me because I'm good. I'm doing all the right things. I'm spiritual. I'm awake. I'm conscious. And because it protects us from having to feel the pain of the people on this planet who are suffering in ways that we may never be able to understand. Because it's overwhelming, and I get that, and I validate that. But again, I think it's dangerous rhetoric to say they are just choosing and low vibes and don't look at that and it's a distraction. Okay? And then talking about attachment, right? Again, we all have attachment. The reason that most of us are trying to become unattached to outcome and unattached to feelings and emotions and unattached to people and unattached to whatever it is that we are just attached to, and that it is because we're trying to protect ourselves from the disappointment of not having what we want. We're trying to protect ourselves from the disappointment of not knowing how to create what we want. We're trying to backdoor convince the universe to give us something by showing how unattached we are, rather than having a healthy understanding that we all have attachment. We all have attachment to outcome. We all want to feel good in this life. We all want to have experiences that we think are going to make us happy. And that, again, is a normal part of being alive. And if your spiritual techniques and your spiritual teachers are telling you to try to dissociate from that, we want to take a step back and question that teaching. Not to say that it's all wrong and bad, that non-attachment is wrong, because it isn't. Okay? Learning how to hold what we want lightly when we can is a great thing. When we can have flexibility in our idea of what's going to make us happy, when we can say, okay, like this is what I think I want right now, this is what I think I need to be happy, these are the things that I'm going for, but I'm going to be open to life, and I'm going to be open to other things happening, and I'm going to understand that I'm not always going to get what I want. I'm going to shoot for the stars, I'm going to shoot for it, and then learn along the way and be open to other things. That is a good thing. That is, because life, again, there's so much about life we don't know. There's so much about life we don't understand. There's so many things that I have wanted for a very long time that I thought were going to make me happy, that I either never got because something better really did come that I just wasn't even aware of, or because that thing was never going to make me happy anyways. And so learning how to be loosely attached to our stuff is good. Again, but I think what is more important and more valuable is learning how to navigate when we are attached. Like being able to say, okay, no, like I'm just really attached to this thing. I'm really attached to this outcome. I really want this thing. I really want this to be how it is. And to first have compassion for ourselves that is what we want. And that is how we feel, and that is what we think we need right now. And to admit that to ourselves and to own that and to embrace that, I think is the first healthy step, to stop denying it. And then to admit to ourselves where we're disappointed and where we're hurt and where we're upset that we're not getting what we want. Because that, I think, is the next step. We have to validate that stuff. We have to say, I'm upset and I'm pissed and I'm mad at the universe and I'm whatever I'm feeling. And then from there, we can start to say, okay, can I be open to other options? Can I be open to other things? Can I nurse myself through the heartache of just not getting what I want, being lonely, being isolated, not having the health that I want, not having the job that I want, not having the things that I want? And then how can I best support myself through that? How can I best support myself in what I have right now How can I open to other options, right? We expand our perspective to what else might be available and where we could learn and grow and change and evolve and all of these things, while having compassion for this very human part of us that is always going to be attached to outcome. We are always going to be attached to outcome. So long as we're alive and we have the capacity to feel pain and the capacity to feel pleasure, we are going to desire pleasure more than we desire pain. That's normal human, what it is. So, right, like all of this ties together. Our fear of pain is what drives a lot of this. We're afraid of pain, so we don't want to be manipulated, and we don't want to have empathy, and we don't want to feel what other people are feeling. We want to project our own experience onto other people and say, the reason they're suffering is because this, this, and this, because if I were in their shoes, this is what I would do. We want to do that to protect ourselves from the pain of empathizing with people who have it worse than us, who have it different than us, who aren't in a position of pain because they made bad choices. And even if they are, I think this is the other thing. Even if people are in a position where they are in a shitty position because they made bad choices, we can still have empathy for that. And learning how to navigate and process our empathy, I think, is a lot healthier than trying to figure out where we should and shouldn't have empathy. Who is a real thing and who is just a distraction? What information is actually real and what isn't? Okay, again, check in with yourself. Where do you have enough? Where are you safe? Where is it okay? And where is that manipulation trying to get you to buy something or buy into something or to take your attention away from something or someone that really does need your attention? We can look at it that way. Where can we do what we can? And then where can we soothe ourselves where there's nothing we can do or nothing more than we can do? And when we have that existential fear of life going bad for us, again, how can we show up for that in a real way? How can we face the existential reality of being alive where we are vulnerable? And understanding that, yes, with certain amounts of privilege and access, we are less vulnerable. We are having a completely different experience than people who have less than we do, who are in positions in society where there's less upward mobility and less chance of making a good choice. And to own that reality as being a reality, and then saying, where can I work to help support, to create new systems so that that's not how it is anymore? That's what getting out of the matrix is. Realizing where you are enough, realizing where you have enough, realizing where you have produced enough, slowing down, redistributing, not doing more, so that we don't continue to feed into this cycle of more is always better, and then that requiring that there be more and more people at the bottom of our pyramid scheme who have less and less and less. Because that's how this game works. And it's shitty. But it's reality. So it's not about taking your eyes off of what's happening out there. And it's not about saying that everything's just a manipulation, because yeah, everything is a manipulation to get you to buy something, or to get you to consume something, or to get you to focus back in on yourself so that you're not looking out at the world. And that's what I think the distraction is. When we're not looking at the systems and how these systems are creating this manufactured discontent and we don't do anything about it, that's the distraction. People hurting is not the distraction. People hurting is the thing that we need to be looking at. Right? The overworking, overconsuming, overproducing, over-navel-gazing, that's the distraction. So empathy is not a pathology. But it does come with it a lot of existential crisis. And I think we would do better to learn how to support ourselves through that And to have spirituality, like hopefully what I'm producing here, is like, yeah, that existential reality is a part of life. You're not going to escape it. So how do we manage it? How do we support ourselves? How do we find community with other people who are feeling these things too? How do we be supportive for one another? How do we have compassion? How do we do what we can do and then learn to be in our own experience where we've done enough? I think that is a more practical solution, because we're not going to get rid of it. We're not going to get rid of attachment. We're not going to get rid of the problems that happen on this planet. And empathy is part of how we're going to get out of this problem. We need to be able to empathize with people who are having a different experience than us, so that we can support the change of the system to create something better for everyone. So empathy is not a distraction and it is not a pathology. It's the way out. But we can't let it crush us, and we can't let it consume us, and we can't let it make us hard and say that everything's a distraction and I'm not going to look at it because I don't want to feel it. Okay? So that's how I think we need to be looking at our empathy. And again, understanding everyone is trying to sell you something. So when you interact with media, before you do, can you find your center? Do you really need that thing? That thing they're telling you to be afraid of? Is it really going to affect you? And if not, is it going to affect someone else who is in a different position than you? Because maybe it won't affect you, but that doesn't mean that it's not a big deal. And then maybe you can understand that, yeah, it won't affect me, but it will affect other people. So how can I be a support for those people? Because not everyone is having my experience. Right? We want to use empathy as a way of seeing the world through the lens of other people, so that we can build a more equitable world for all of us. And empathy is going to help us get there, but we just can't get crushed by it. Okay? So that's that for today. Let me know what you think. Questions, comments, concerns. I'm here for all of it. And other than that, have a beautiful day, night, week, and I'll see you in the next video.